Welcome to my session. We will talk a bit more about ALM for Dataverse, and in my case, it's a general introduction to ALM, and we can also touch on those questions we had for the last session from Whale, maybe a bit later on about the accelerator and so on. I will not talk about that much. It's, as mentioned, a general introduction. We will build a pipeline in DevOps directly, but we will not use the accelerator for it. But I have some opinions there as well. Maybe I can share them later if you have some time. So first of all, I want to introduce myself. Bendik Bergman, my name, as mentioned. I'm a Power Platform consultant here at CM Consulterna in Sweden, Stockholm. Moved here from Germany around five and a half years ago-ish. I'm a .NET developer from the beginning and have added Angular later on and React. Then I moved on to Dynamics CRM, C, model-driven apps, and then Power Platform as we know it today. Or more or less, I was moved on to it. So as most of us, I was not my first choice. It was more of a coincidence that I ended up here, but I like it. So if you want to get in contact with me, here are my contact details: Twitter, LinkedIn, mail, and my blog. Feel free to contact me on any of those if you have any questions, even later. I will show them at the end of the session as well and can share them in chat afterwards. So what is it we want to go through in the next hour? It's first of all a leveling. So I will talk a bit about ALM in general and what it is, and so that we have a common understanding about certain things, both ALM in general, but also directly for Dataverse. So the more special things we have for when it comes to Dataverse. And then we will take a look at the basic ALM setup. And if you have time, a bit more adding complexity to it, some quality gates and checks for pull requests and so on. I will at least mention it. We might not have time to build those pipelines, but I will talk about them. So leveling, first of all. What is ALM and why do we need it? ALM is application lifecycle management. So it's more than just the pipelines we will talk about today. It's basically planning, developing, testing, deployment, maintenance, and then the whole cycle begins from the beginning as well. Again, so what we'll talk about today is mostly the deployment part and not the rest. So the rest could be like in DevOps work items and having meetings with the customer to gather your requirements and so on. But what we will talk about today is the deployment part and maybe a bit the testing part if we have time for that. But not all the rest. But it's important to know that ALM is not just the thing we are talking about today. It's more than that. And yeah, the one you want to achieve is as much automation as possible in the deployment part, because if you do stuff manually, it is time consuming and it's error prone, because not everyone knows every fine detail of your solution, especially when it's a big solution. So you only have like a few people really able to deploy. But if you have pipelines and it's automated, it's always the same that runs, and it can be like triggered from different persons. They don't have to have all the knowledge about your solution because it's implemented in your pipelines. So it minimizes manual work, which increases quality. And that's basically it. Then a bit about solutions, so that we are on the same level here as well. Solutions are containers, basically, which include different components and can then be moved from one environment to another. You should never include all components. Especially if you do like include a table from the Microsoft, so a standard table like contacts or accounts, those should never be included with all components, because that can lead to errors later on, and dependencies to Microsoft solution and so on. Solutions are configurable. It contains only the customizations and only the unmanaged ones. So if you, for example, put in a field from a standard solution or something which is managed already in your environment, and you change something, and then you do an export of your unmanaged solution, it will only take the unmanaged parts in the solution. Depends. There are some components which will be included either way. You should do purpose or supplier separation, and should take a note of the publisher there. So that means that the recommendation from Microsoft is that you have one solution per environment, one unmanaged solution per environment. So in Dev, one solution. And if you have different areas you're working on, they should be in different environments. This to minimize your cross dependencies, because all those can lead to errors later on. You could, if you have a solution, you could either patch them or cloning. So that's a bit the old UI, but you can increase like just the version, the first 2 parts of the version. Or if you have patching, then it's only the last 2 parts of the version. And they have, patches have their own limitations, I would say. And usually, if it comes to automated deployment, you usually don't use patches because they are very hard to maintain. One reason is that, let's say you have you want to patch something in production, and the patch, if you create a patch, the base version or the version of your base solution has to be the same in your target environment as it is in the environment where the patch is coming from. And usually, if you come to production and you want to fix something, a production development or test is further, it's like the versioning is further ahead of production. So you can't just create a patch in development. So that's a bit hard to handle. So we use patches only manually from a hotfix environment. But I might have a slide for that as well, or I have a slide for that as well. So a bit illustration of solutions here. If you have one solution and the contact entity is included in solution A and in solution B, and then you add a field, and the contact would be included as include all, it would automatically be included in both solutions, which then can lead to errors later on. Yeah, and then another thing here, again, the include all components. If you have like an ESV solution which is managed, and you have your own solution which is managed in test and production, and your contact is included with all components, the ISV view will be in your solution as well, probably. So basically, which can lead to errors when the ISV deletes the view or something like that. So don't do that. Yeah, you can manage the properties, what can be changed and so on in your solution. So if you that's of interest, if you have an ISV, or if you have several development teams within your organization and they build on each other's solution, then you can then you can like define what could be created or changed from your solution to secure the stuff you have done, so that not everyone can change stuff you have created. Yeah, so then we have, yeah, that's the rest I've talked about. I don't have anything more for that. You have 2 things, customizations and data, and that the last part is more the stuff that Wade talked about in the previous session. So how to have ALM for your data. What we will talk about is ALM for customizations. So customizations is basically entities, fields, business rule, and so on. And data is more the entity records, like a contact row or an account row. And data can't be included in your solution, but there are exceptions. For example, environment variables or application detection rules, those are basically just rows, but they are solution aware. So Microsoft made them solution aware, and you can include them even though they are only data, basically. And then I talked a bit about managed and unmanaged and so on. It's a long-standing discussion, but I follow the Microsoft recommendations. Everything which isn't development is managed for me. And what does this mean? So if you have on the one hand, you have unmanaged, which means that if you have an unmanaged solution, you can add components, you can remove components and delete components from it. You can export it both as unmanaged or managed, and it can, if you delete it, all the components won't be uninstalled. They will just live in the environment, maybe not within another solution, and you don't have any knowledge about them any longer. On the other hand, if you come to managed, you can't edit those components. You can't add those, you can't remove components from it. There are some exceptions for that as well, but you cannot export the solution. But if you delete the solution, all the components which are included in the solution will be uninstalled if they are not part of another managed solution. But we will come to that later as well, probably. Then there's this thing called layering within Dataverse. So, and this it kind of leads to confusion sometimes here and there. So basically what the system is doing is at the top you can see like what the end user is seeing, and that's a combination of all the solutions you have installed. And how this is working is basically that it layers up every managed solution. So if a new solution is installed, it will be on top of the other solution. And here it's important the date of the first installation. And this could lead to problems when, for example, and we had that. So we had the standard CDS solution. So that's a default environment, the standard solution Microsoft presents. It's no layer, even though it's an unmanaged solution. And then we had our own solution installed here as the next one, basically. And Microsoft decided to install a third solution because we had some first-party apps. And they introduced a new solution for it, which was installed after our solution, which broke our system because they made changes to a field which we also had in our solution, because we have, in this case, I think we made it like required from business, so from optional to business required, and they changed it back to optional, something like that. And we had no possibility to override theirs because this solution for Microsoft was installed later. So what we had to do is we had to create a new unmanaged solution in development, moved our components over, deployed the new one, and then it like was a layer above that, and then we could erase ours. So our stuff was on top again. So that could lead to problems, just that you have heard about it. And then at the end, all the unmanaged customizations are winning. So if you would have unmanaged customizations in, for example, production, those are winning, no matter what you do with your managed solutions. And this also can lead to problems if some users going into, for example, flows or any fields in the default environment, default solution, and change stuff. And then you deploy your new version of the solution, and you wonder why it won't like appear your changes. This could be that there is an unmanaged layer. So you have to remove the unmanaged layer, and then your changes will be in effect, so to say. Next thing is you have, if you deploy stuff, you have either update or upgrade, and that's for managed only. If you're unmanaged, you only have update. An update will basically install new components, which, for example, if you have a solution and it's both installed in development, test, and production, and you introduce a new field for one of your entities, a table, sorry, and then you move it to test. An update will install the field as expected. And it will update existing components, like changing from optional to business required, or changing the length of your field, or whatever you've changed, it will be updated. An upgrade will do this as well, but it will also uninstall components which were removed. So let's say you have a field, you have introduced a new custom field on contact and deployed it to production. And then after a while, you say, okay, we don't need that field any longer. So you remove it from development. When you do an upgrade with the next version, then it will be removed from your test and production as well, automatically. But it's only possible if the the version you try to install is higher than the version that is already installed in the environment. Otherwise, you don't have the possibility to do an upgrade. And then an upgrade usually takes a bit longer than an update. So what we usually do is we deploy updates all the time. And every now and then, and once in a while, we do an upgrade to remove all the stuff that we have deleted. So to clean up, basically. So 2 environments, I promised I will talk about that as well a bit. We usually have like development, test, and production. That's what we have at least. And we develop in development an unmanaged solution and move it then to test and production in our pipeline. Yeah, that's the same. What our goal would be is to have development, a JIT build, so just-in-time build environment in between, and test and production. The idea would be to deploy our unmanaged solution to our JIT build environment, and then export as managed and move it to test and production. The platform isn't there yet. We had a lot of problems with those JIT environments. One thing is they take too long to set up. So if you create an environment, there are steps in the build tools. And I usually use the Power Platform build tools from Microsoft. And there are steps for environment creation, but it takes long time. And we usually have several languages because we're in Sweden. Our base language is usually English, and then we activate Swedish as well, and sometimes other Nordic languages like Finnish or Danish or whatever. So, and this takes a long time, as we know. Activating languages it's a long process or a long running process. Then it's hard to install first-party apps because there aren't any out-of-the-box build tools for that. I don't even know if Whale has it in his build tools, but otherwise you could do it with shell scripting and so on. So, but it's hard. And then also, if you have something like, for example, marketing, that's hard to install in an automated process, if it even goes. And then if you have ISV solutions and so on. So it just takes too long time to do it like every night, if you have this build every night. So that's why also in this demo, we will skip this one and we'll just go from dev to test to prod. And we usually do that as our customers as well. Yeah. And then in addition to those 4 or 3, we usually have an evaluation environment, and that's for the waves. So whenever the early access for a wave is released, we copy development to our evaluation environment and activate the early access over there. And the reason for that is that we earlier had problems if, for example, dev is on the early access. We weren't able to deploy to test or production because Microsoft has changed so much in their solution that those environments weren't compatible with each other, and we had like dependencies were missing and so on. So that's why we evaluate in an own environment. And when we near the installation of the wave, then we will activate it in all environments at the same time, like dev, test, and production. Otherwise, we had problems doing hotfixes and so on. Then we sometimes, not often, but sometimes have a performance test environment where we run, as the name says, performance testing. So we create a lot of stuff and do a lot of requests in a short period of time, just to see how our solution is performing on high traffic. But that's not very often that we have it, actually. And then we usually have a hotfix environment, which has the same version as production, but is unmanaged. So whenever there is some error in production, we can hotfix it from there. So this one usually, either we have it standing there with the same version as production, but unmanaged, or we create it when needed, because we have the solution in our source control. So we can spin up a new environment, just install the solution, the version we have in production, and do our fixes and deploy a patch over manually, basically. Then another thing we usually, or in some cases, have is if the customer comes and says, okay, we want to do stuff ourselves, but we are a consultancy, and we usually have like our dev environment, and we are responsible for changes in that. And the customer comes and says, okay, we want to do stuff ourselves, but still you have to be responsible for the stuff you are doing. So we don't want to have them in our dev environment, because if they mess things up, we can't take responsibility for it. So what we usually do is we have an internal dev, or however you call it, but it's a dev environment for the customer. And what we do then is we deploy our solution as managed to the internal dev of the customer. They have their own solution, and then we deploy both of them to test and production. So basically, the solution of the customer is building on top of our solution. And there was a question: how do you merge hotfixes with your dev instance? Yeah, that's a good question. So if we go back to this one, so if, let's say we have a hotfix environment which has the same version as we have in production, but unmanaged, the development and test could be further ahead. So that's a bit, sometimes we just often when we have hotfixes, it's in code actually, so C# or whatever. So then we can just merge it in our usual branches and deploy it to dev. If it's something like in the fields or in flow, if it's fields, it's usually easiest to just do it in dev as well. And if it's flow, you could either create a patch for it, include it in a patch, and change the version of dev back, install the patch, and move the version back to what it was, because that's possible in the maker portal. Or you just create a own moving solution, move it over, and include it in your unmanaged solution. So those are the basic 3 methods you could use for that. Okay, so then we have different tests, and I talked about some of them already. So we have unit testing, we have UI tests with Easy Repro, for example. We have integration tests for both TypeScript and C# code or plugins. We could have regression tests running all the time. We could have load tests or load tests and performance tests, and smoke tests, which are usually manually. So those are basically the different tests you run. If you run all of them, by far not every project has that, but some of them are manually, and some of them can be automated and developed, so to say. Those have a bit changed the limitations, but flows with other connectors like SharePoint and third party. Now we have connection references since some time, so it got much better. And earlier we had the standard process of having own solution just for flows, because flows were inactivated whenever you have deployed them. So you had to go in manually and activate those. But with the new versions of the Power Platform BuildTools, like version 2.0, I think, that's fixed, especially if you use settings files, and we will take a look at those as well. So that's not a big problem any longer. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about the basic ALM process we want to fix and build in the demo. We will use an Azure DevOps project. We will use the Power Platform BuildTools from Microsoft. I have already configured application registration, or I have one application registration, which is configured in both my demo environments, and I have created connection to both of them in DevOps. But I will show you how you do that as well. We will have, there is an arrow, but we will have two pipelines, one to create the export from dev and one to release it to test. As mentioned, the second one would be if we have a JIT environment, but we don't. So the first pipeline, what does it do? It exports from dev, it unpacks the zip file, it checks it in our dev branch, and it creates an artifact. This artifact can then be used from our release pipeline it gets the artifact and deploys it to test, and then maybe further on to production. Usually you have like, or at least test and production. Maybe you have some in between, like internal test, then the customer's development, shared test, user acceptance test, production, and so on. So in one of my projects I was in, that we had like in this flow or in the pipeline, we had nine environments after each other. That was the max I was in a project in. Usually we have 3, dev, test, and production. So let's get into the demo. I will just check if there are any questions. So yeah, do you actually do performance testing on Power Platform? I thought these were discouraged due to shared infra on MS side. No, the last time I checked, and that was with like maybe 1.5 years ago with Fastback, they actually recommended that, doing performance tests. So unless there was any change on that, it's okay from Microsoft side. That's as far as I know it is. And what we are testing is basically our code, mostly the plugins and so on, how they perform. And then most if you have synchronous plugins, which you should have not so many, but there could be any, some of them. JIT build should be unmanaged to export and manage from there, but this can have problems as well because then none of your components will be removed. So you have to trash your JIT environment every now and then, or if it's re-JIT, then it's not a problem. But if you have like a pseudo JIT, which is just in between, and you don't delete it every time you do a deployment, then it will like have cluttery old stuff in it. So that has to be taken in consideration there as well. So there's another question. I mentioned that we use the update usually, and then sometimes the upgrade. The question is if in between multiple updates, imports, you have removed some changes from solution and then imported into production, so that will be not removed from production and maybe created problems in production. Yeah, that could be if you have still stuff hanging around. But usually what will be removed is usually flows and fields and so on. And you then just don't show the fields any longer and take it away from all your flows and plugins and so on. But yeah, it could be errors. But even so, even if you have like, let's say you delete one field now and then you do an update because you want to spare your time, and you delete another field the next release and you do an update still. And the third release, you say, okay, we delete complete entities or a table, another one, and then we do an upgrade. All those first two fields will be deleted as well. So it's looking into what is missing from the solution now and what is still there, and delete the difference from both. So it will handle even older deletions with an upgrade later. Good. Let's go into the demo. I just have to find the right. Where are we? Here we go. So as mentioned, I'm using the Microsoft Power Platform BuildTools for Azure DevOps. You have to install them once in your organization, and then you can use them in every project and every tool or in every pipeline you want to. And I recommend using the version 2.0 because it's building on the Power Platform CLI, and it's much faster and gets more updates now because the 1.x doesn't get any updates any longer. So there are new steps, or currently there aren't any new steps, but they are optimized at least. So let's see what we have here. I will just make it like that. So I have my development environment, and I have created a trial some days ago just for this demo purpose. And what we want to do is, in my development environment, I have one solution which is called ALM demo, I think. Where it is? Here it is. And it's a very basic solution so that our pipeline is fast, but it contains one table, ALM demo, and one Canvas app ALM demo as well. So that's it, basically. And this one we want to move to my trial environment. See if I can open this here. Oh, there it is. So you can see here there's like nothing installed at the moment. I just created it. So that we want to move from one environment to the other. So let's do that. So here I'm my demo Azure DevOps. I have in here stuff also, yeah, in my repository it's empty. So we will store a version, an unzipped version of our unmanaged solution in this folder here. If you have several solutions, you will have one folder per solution underneath solutions over here. And then we usually use YAML for our pipelines. For this demo, I will show it how it will look like in the UI because it's a bit more, or I find it easier to understand. But we will take a look at those as well. And my recommendation would be to use YAML instead, actually, especially if you have several projects. So what we have a template project which has a setup for TypeScript, front-end testing, typings based on our environment, C#, select plugins and workflow steps, and a setup for unit tests and integration tests for those, early bounding for our C# and so on. And it also has our YAML templates. So everything we have to do is create pipelines based on our templates, which makes the setup for ALM much easier. And even someone who isn't as deep into the material of ALM and pipelines can create those because we have a standard template for it, which is way more complex if you do it in the UI. But it's better for a basic understanding to get like the first glance of it. That's why we are doing it in the UI now. So let's see. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you the connection. So if you go, so let's go back to the repository. So if you go to project settings down here, and then you have service connections, And as mentioned, I have created two for development and test. My trial is our test in this case. What you want to do is a new service connection, and then you pick Power Platform, which comes when you have installed the Power Platform BuildTools. It automatically adds like this one. And then you present like the URL to your environment, the tenant ID, application ID, client secret, name of the service connection, and then it's important to click this thing. It should be selected as the default, but make sure to have it. Otherwise, the pipelines can't use this connection, which makes it basically unusable. Yeah, so as you can see here, you need an application registration for it. For those, for the steps, you could also use a generic connection, for example, for export, but the solution checker step needs one of those. And I usually use an application registration. I don't want to use a personal a connection to install stuff, to test and production. Yeah, so I've created those already, and the application registration is set up as a user in both environments as well. I might be able to show you, then it makes it more easier to understand. So if you go to the admin portal and you go to environments, and then we select my environment here, and we go to settings, user permission, you have the application users over here. And here you can see it's my demo application, which is registered, and it's quite easy. You just go in here, add an app, and then you can choose from all the apps you have in your tenant. You can assign a business unit, which is in my case quite easy because I only have one. And you can assign a business security role. And then you click create, and it's generated and it has access. As easy as that. So let's go to pipelines. So first of all, we want to create a pipeline which exports stuff from our environment. So we go here for now. Usually, as mentioned, if you have YAML files, you would use this one over here, and we can do that as well later. But for now, I will use the classic editor, and I will use yeah, that's basically it. I want to use Azure repository. In my demo project, my demo repository, I have several ones, but we need the demo one, and it should be on the master branch for now. And then we say an empty job. So here we are. First of all, we go into the agent and say that scripts are allowed to access our OAuth tokens. That's important. And then I have to open something over here. Yeah. So then we want to have a variable, which is the solution name. And in our case, it's ALM demo. And we can see that, let me switch back here. It's not the display name, it's the name. So if we go here, and it's like this one, that's the one we have to present. And so over here, so that we have, and then we want to add some tasks here. So we go to Power Platform, sorry. So we want to install the tools, because in that case, it's or if you have a basic subscription for DevOps, you share the agent with others, and you get or you share the agent pool with others, and you get, it might be that you get assigned a new agent for every pipeline run. So you have to make sure that the tooling for Power Platform is installed, because it could be that the agent was used for just Azure deployments previously. So we really have to install the tooling every time to make sure it's on the machine that we are using. And then we want to export a solution. We want to maybe publish customizations before that. And we want to export a solution once more. That's it for those. And then we want to have a command line to check in our changes. I forgot one, sorry. We want to unpack our solution as well. Where do we have it? Export unpack solution. And then we want to publish artifacts. Publish artifacts, and this has to be in this order. So now you see. So now, first of all, we have added all the steps we need for the really basic setup. There is way more to that, but this would export. It would be a basic export. So you can start with that, and then you see some red stuff here. So you need to configure those. The tooling doesn't need any configuration because we want to use version 2 and not 0. So we want to use the latest and greatest. Then we want to publish our customizations, and here we want to connect to our environment. Usually it is on username password, but we don't have any connections of those types. We only have service principal. So if we change to service principal here, and now our connections are coming up here. So if we might duplicate that, let's just try to create one of those others. So you would go to generic. Oh yeah, and I have a blog post on the stuff I'm talking about now, but also on how to, what do you have to do to set up the application registration? So which permissions does it need, and which steps do you have to do in Azure AD and so on. So I can send the link in chat as well, so we can go there. So yeah, we leave it like that. So we want to publish our customizations in our dev environment. That's not needed any longer, or it's using from our connection. That's basically everything we have to do here. Then we want to export our solution from the same environment. And the solution name, if you remember, we have created a variable for it, so we can just write solution name, which will take the variable for it. Then we have solution output file, and this one should be, I have to look in my notes on the other screen. Let me just open the right one. Here we are. And we have export solution. So like that, we do it like that, and then we just use solution name. We copy it, and in this case we want to have it like unmanaged, because that's the one we want to unzip later on. Everything else is fine for now. The second export is, as an artifact, we want to have also the managed solution, because that's the one we want to install in test and production. So we do another export, and this time we take managed instead. Oh, sorry. Take it like that, and the solution name is like that. And we check this export as managed solution. So now we export it once as unmanaged and once as managed. And then we want to unpack our unmanaged solution and store it in our repository. So we take this solution we just created in this export step, and we want to have it in our platform solutions, and then we want to have it in like solution name. So now it would now it would create a subfolder within our solutions folder and extract our solution to that. At the moment, it will not extract the Canvas apps. If I remember correctly, it will be an MSF file. There is possibility to do that, and it will come to this unpack step. I'm not sure if it's there yet, but we will see when it's running. Type of solution is unmanaged, so the rest is fine. Then we have to commit our stuff to our repository, and I have a little script for that, and we go through it line by line, but I have to delete some stuff here, actually. So I want to get rid of all this echo stuff, which is good for debugging, but we don't need that now. Just delete all of those. Like that. So, and what are we doing here? Let's see, just a 4-minute correct, sorry. So what are we doing here? The first 2 lines are setting who is the one who is like doing stuff. So we configure the person who has triggered the pipeline as the changing person, or as the person who does our commit. Then we do a fetch and a checkout of mains, because it could be that there was some change in between up here to there, to make sure we have it checked out. We add every change to our commit. We do another commit, or we do our commit, and then we do another pull to really make sure that there aren't any changes in between, like the row up here and there. It has happened sometimes, so that's why we have it here. And then we do a push to our origin. As you have seen, I had some configuration in that, so that the branch can be changed. For now, it's okay to have it hard-coded here, because we know that it's the main branch. Oh, it isn't. Nice, it's master. Over here, you can see it. So we change it to master then. So here it says we are the master branch, not the main branch. So like that. And the next thing is, I think I did some mistake here. Let's see. Yeah, I wanted to have those. Sorry about that. Don't want to have those. I want to have it in the artifact folder. So, and then we want to publish stuff. So we want to publish our artifact staging directory, and it should be, I usually use artifact name drop, and that's it. So then the next pipeline could use the stuff we have created here. So let's see if it's working. Let's run it. Fingers crossed. So that's working. And one more thing you usually have to do is go into repositories, open your repository, go to security, and add to this demo build service, allow and contribute. Otherwise, it is not allowed to do commits in your name. But I have done that already, so it hopefully runs through here. So we let this one go off, and we will build our release pipeline for now. So let's go there. Oh yeah, one thing. I want to rename that. We want to have it like export from dev. So one more thing is, if you do your pipelines with YAML, the build and the release pipelines will be shown under pipelines. So they are both here in this list. If you do it via the UI, your build pipeline will be here and your release pipeline will be under releases. But this one is like the classic way of doing it. It's not deprecated yet. That's why it's not called the old way. It's just the classic way. But over time, this release thing will go away, basically. But for now, we can use it. So we use a new pipeline, and we say empty job as well. And then we add an artifact and we just use our just created pipeline over here, select it, and we add it. So we now could say it should have a continuous deployment trigger. So whenever our build pipeline is ready and it runs successfully, then we create a new release. We don't need that now, but you could have that. So you just trigger your first build pipeline, and the release pipeline will be triggered automatically and deploys to test after that. So here again, we need some variable, or one variable, which is solution name, ALM demo, and pipeline, and we will add some jobs in here. We don't need scripts. So let's our platform, tool installer and import solution. That's basically everything we need in this at the moment. So we will go and say, now we want to connect to our test environment instead. And the solution input file would be in here, and then drop, because that's our artifact name. And then we have like, what was it? Solution name underscore managed dot zip. So that's basically everything we need in here. So let's go to the pipeline and save it. Yeah, okay. Okay, this one is now run through. We have created one artifact, which is a drop, and it has our ALM demo.zip and our ALM demo managed.zip. So when we create a release now, it hopefully will deploy to our test environment. So we will let this one run, see later, and take another look at the presentation, because I have some more slides. So we could add complexity, because that was really just basic and very easy and simple setup. You could add more complexity, for example, quality gates, unpacking your canvas app, but this will come into the out-of-the-box step later. You could deploy web resources and plugins within your solution. You can automate the deploy, as mentioned, like every night or whenever your build is running, you should do a release as well. You could do quality checks for your pull requests. So a pipeline that runs automatically when you create a pull request or a new commit to the pull request, and it runs all your tests. And only if this one is green, you are allowed to merge the pull request, for example. Yeah, creating environments on the fly, but that's a bit hard. You can move configuration. That's more the stuff that Wade talked about, and you could do it in your pipeline as well. And then we have some possible quality gates. For example, one which is really easy is adding the solution checker. It's just one more step. You can run your unit tests, UI tests with Easy Repro, but I would recommend to not run them whenever you run your pipeline, because they are long running. So what we usually do is, if we have those, then we run them like once a night, and not in our usually commit pipeline. Because it takes too long to run them. You can run integration tests. We don't run them all the time either. Yeah, that's pipelines where you can edit solution checker after the export, so that you only check in your stuff to your repository whenever the solution checker is green and doesn't have any errors. You could set the version within your pipeline. That's what we usually do. You could deploy a web resource before you do the export. So that means that only the version that it's really tested and accepted, which you have in your main or master branch, will be in dev when you do your export. Because usually you have like unfinished stuff in development. You want to get rid of that. You don't want to move that to test or production. Yeah, there would be a demo for that, but we don't have time for that, unfortunately. but we can take a look. So now this one is done. So we should be able to see the solution in my other environment now. If I do F5. So it was moved over to my tribe, basically. And then if you go to here and we go to repository, in here we should now have ALM demo, and then we have like the entity and the canvas app, which is still just an MSZ file, I think. Yeah, it's still just the MSZ file, so basically a zip file, but you could extract those as well, and as mentioned, that will come to the step, yeah, sooner or later. I don't know when, but it should come to it. Yes. So, are there any questions? What do we have? So there was a question like, where are the secrets stored? And then it was already answered, because yeah, Azure keywords, you can take it from there. It depends on which secrets those are. You could use environment variables with the type secret, but they aren't generally available yet, unfortunately, and Microsoft shut down the ability to use them in like code some weeks ago. So you only can use them in flows, and there isn't like any alternative to it. So you have to get stuff from your keyboard by yourself. Other than that, like the secrets for the App extension, you have to, the App extension you're using for your pipeline, you have to have it in the connection, and that's where it is. So it's within data within the DevOps. So that's where it has to be, unfortunately. So then let's say you have to update a component in the next environment. How do you handle version numbers increments for the solution in the pipeline? Yeah, so we usually have a step to increase solution version, and it will also increase or it will set the same version for our C# assembly as it also sets to our solution, just to have it like, it's the same version and so on. It's better for traceability and error, or if you want to dig into errors or so debug stuff. And then we usually set it within the pipeline, and what we do is the first 3 parts of this of the version is manually, so I have variables for those. Let's say that is set to 1, 1, 1, and then the last one is like an increment of whenever the pipeline runs, it increments it by 1. And when we decide, okay, we have done so much stuff that we want to go to the next version, then we have to change like the variable in our pipeline to, let's say, 200 or 120 or whatever it is. But that's a manual process, because we have to decide now it's time we have done enough. It's a new version, basically. So who takes care of ALM for the project? Would that be a dedicated resource for each project, or this would be done by a separate team? And that's a classic "it depends" answer. For most of our customers, it's one of our team members. So they usually don't have a dedicated ALM or DevOps team. So we handle it. And if they do, they usually don't have a clue about Dataverse, which makes it a bit harder, because then they try to force certain templates which aren't working for Dataverse. So the discussion is a bit harder in my experience. But usually it's at our company, it's often me or 1 or 2 other colleagues handling the ALM process for all of our projects, basically. But we have like small to middle size customers. We don't have so many big customers. Yeah. And then Cheryl mentioned that they have a DevOps team handling ALM. Yeah, really good link to Zero to Hero from Victor. You should follow that. Have I missed any questions?
Thank you, Benedict, for answering all those questions. I think you have actually answered all the questions. I think the only final question is the one that Sean has just posted, which was, could you share your opinion on ALM Accelerator?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we don't use it in our organization because the implementation doesn't fit what our customers usually need. So, and as I mentioned, we have our own templates, and often our customers aren't in the state as that they have the capacity to think about ALM. It's more like you say we need it, do it. We trust you enough that you do it right, but they usually don't take the ownership of it yet. And yeah, the accelerator wasn't a fit for us until now, so we don't usually use it.
Well, thank you, Benedict. There is a question asking for you to share your blog in the chat so that the attendees can try and follow your tutorial.
Sure, I will post it, and I will also post my contact information in there.
Thank you so much once again, Benedict, for joining us today and closing off the first track, the first day of the Dataverse Summit, which is focused on administration, ALM. So I want to thank you for that. Huge round of applause for Benedict, everyone. And we hope to see you next time, but in person.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Benedict.